Hey, thanks everybody for joining us again at Manifest. I've got Andy with us, and we have a special guest, Carrie, with us today from Provision Law. She's going to be covering a little bit about, something that we talk about almost every meeting, I think, Andy, and that's estate planning, and how integral parts of that is. But specifically, we're going to be diving into a topic near and dear to Minnesotans' hearts and people out in, Michigan and everybody who's got a cabin.
Welcome everybody, and we're excited to have Carrie join us. She's got a lot of knowledge on this topic and everything estate planning related. So we're looking forward to hearing what she has to fill us in with. So
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie, we'll let you give us a little bit of your background and tell us about provision law and then keeping the farm, or not the farm, the cabin in the family.
What we're going to talk about today applies to farms just as well. So we'll get into that in a minute. But thank you, Adam and Andy, for having me today. My name is Carrie Renner. I own Provision Law Firm in Burnsville, and we are almost exclusively estates and trusts law firm. So we help folks on the planning side of things. We also help them on the administration side of things. After somebody has passed away. So we're really just about helping people make smooth transitions. And that really rings true when it comes to planning for family cabins as well.
Awesome.
great,
That's
that's
great.
great.
With that, I think the estate portion, Andy and I talk about this almost every meeting with clients as we talk about estate planning, and it's I know we actually have, so some of our clients might recognize you because I know some of them use you for their estate planning and that type of thing. So thank you for that, and thanks for all the work that you do for them. So we appreciate it. And along those lines, could you dive in a little bit about, what you think about how that process works from your end? Because we talk about it so much from our side. But how does that work from your end? What do you like to see? And then a little bit of specifics about, keeping the cabin within the family, because I know that's a topic we talk about quite a bit.
Yes, thank you. So, estate planning generally, I tell folks, is really not about the documents. It's not a checklist of do I have a will? Do I have a trust? Do I have this and that? Yes, there are some things that run true for everybody. Probably everybody over the age of 18 should have a healthcare directive and a power of attorney. Those are the documents that are there for us. They're not there so much for our loved ones, but they're there so that we can enable people to make decisions for us, whether it be health related or financial related. If you
Absolutely.
don't have those things, your spouse isn't automatically going to have those rights. Your adult children are not automatically going to have those rights, and they will face a court process, most likely, either a guardianship or a conservatorship, in order to obtain those rights. So there's some very simple things everybody should be doing to protect from that. But when it comes to do I need a will? Do I need a trust? Should I use a transfer and death deed? Those nuances of transferring assets really comes down to what are your goals? For a lot of people, a top goal is avoiding probate. For almost everybody I've ever met who is talking about estate planning, their biggest goal of all is how do I keep the kids getting along? How do I not have this be an emotional mess for my family when I die? And sometimes avoiding probate and keep creating that smooth transition can be done in two different ways. So when we start to talk about transferring assets, we're always going to back up from there and talk about what are your goals? Is there a special needs person in your family? Is there a blended family? Is there a farm, a cabin, a condo down in Florida, something that we're trying to protect? And really looking at family dynamics and types of assets when we have that conversation.
Right.
That's great. I think that syncs very well with what we are usually explaining to clients, which is estate planning is mostly about, it's not really about you so much. I mean, obviously the first two documents you mentioned is, but the rest of it is about making the transition easier for your family, making sure there's as few arguments as possible, ideally, that your assets are going to the places that you want them to go to in the simplest way so that your family isn't trying to figure things out after the fact. And that sounds like that's what you're helping people do, is simplify that process. So
Absolutely. And I would just like to add that Sometimes, a lot of times, people will come to me and say, I just want to keep this simple. And my response to that is this. Do you want your plan to be simple or do you want the administration to be simple?
Right.
Because by far the simplest thing you can do is nothing at all. If you do nothing at all, that's very easy and it's going to cost you nothing. But that's not going to be an easy transition for your families. That is going to require court proceedings and time and expense. So sometimes putting the work in on the front end to have simplicity on the other side of life is a good thing.
Oh, that's a
Absolutely.
great point.
No, very good, very good. So can you tell us a little bit more about specifically, I know I've recently had quite a few conversations about keeping a cabin in the family, especially from the perspective of a larger family, right? So you've got a lot of kids, you've got, spouses and grandkids and really just the conversations that go around about, what do you really want to have with the family? How do those discussions work? And what do you recommend?
Yeah, that's it's one of my favorite questions in the work that I get to do because I'm passionate about family cabins and there is no cookie cutter response to that. The one thing that's true for most of us is the cabin, if we have one, is going to be a very unique asset that's going to require unique attention in the planning side of things. And it's unique because it incorporates not just the value, a high value, similar to your house in most cases, or even your 401k in some cases, but it also comes with all the sentiment that is included in the photo albums and the family heirlooms. And so you've got the financial side and the emotional side all rolled into this one asset. So you've got something expensive that can't be chopped up into pieces, and a lot of people who want it in many cases. So that makes the cabin a unique and important asset to plan for specifically. When we start to talk about the cabin, there are five things that we cover. And the first one is the one that too often gets skipped over. And the first one is you need to have an honest conversation with your family. So don't come and say, we need a cabin LLC, we need a cabin trust. I've heard about these great ways to continue the legacy of the family cabin without first talking to your kids or your
Right.
grandkids or whoever you think might want this because how you see it isn't necessarily how they see it. And what your dream is doesn't necessarily need to be their dream. So if you have the conversation and you find out we do have a lot of people who want it, who can afford it, and who can get along with each other, then we can go on to the next step. But if you find that's not the case, then let's talk about other solutions. Maybe
Right.
it goes to one and other assets go to another. Maybe it gets sold completely and they rent a VRBO each year with the money that you leave. But let's tailor the plan to what's going to be right for your family. So that's number one.
Awesome.
Then if they say, yep, this sounds like something that's going to be workable for my family, then we'll move on to number two. And then we're going to start talking about, well, what are your legal rights with this cabin? Is this something that you own yourself? Do you own it with another family member? Sometimes we find that they're already owned by a legal entity like a trust or an LLC. Sometimes there's
Right.
a life estate. So we really need to dive deeper and look at any title issues and just basically how that property is owned. You can only control what you own. And I know that seems obvious, but if you own a cabin with your brother because your parents left it to you, they've passed, and now you own it with your brother, and you're coming to me saying, we want to create a plan that's going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, we need your brother's buy-in for that. Otherwise, we can only do X, Y, and Z with half of the cabin. And that's about as good as trying to sell a cabin that's half owned by your brother. It's hard to find somebody who wants to buy that.
Right, right. Good point. Good point.
Right.
All right, so once we know what your legal rights are and we've determined you do have the right to legally plan for the future of the cabin, now we talk about the fun part, the rules.
Okay.
And the rules are vast. They can be vast. The more that you can lay out while you have a sense of what those should be, while people are getting along, the better. So generally, rules are going to incorporate things like how will expenses get paid? Is there going to be some money left with the cabin used, designated, earmarked for the purpose of paying those bills? Um, is it going to be based on usage or ownership? So if somebody lives in Florida and they only get up here once a year and somebody else is local, do they pay the same? Or do we create some sort of an offset on that?
Wow.
We want to think about use of the cabin. That's a thing that is it's going to come up, especially
Right.
as the family base gets broader.
Right.
If you've always been up there for the 4th of July and that's kind of a free-for-all holiday, we have to think about the future and what happens when it's now, instead of 3 siblings, it's 12 cousins who own it together.
Right. There's
And
3
they all want
bedrooms
to
and
bring the
20
guests.
people want to come up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. You want to have it still be a place people enjoy and not start to butt heads.
Right.
So use is really important.
Wow.
Another thing is just having a manager, having somebody be the day-to-day go-to person. If there's 12 owners and there's an issue with, I don't know, the utility company locally, they need to know, who do we talk to? Is
Right.
there a manager? Is there a trustee? Is there a point person for all of this? And then maybe the most important of all when it comes to the rules is thinking about, for all the rules we didn't think of yet, how are we going to make those rules in the future? Are we going to have a majority vote, a unanimous vote? Is there one person who gets to make certain rules? And those will come up. You're never going to think of everything.
Right.
Right. Great
That's
point.
great. I and everything you're saying makes a ton of sense because I would say that every issue we run into with this, with an inherited cabin or something else, it's pretty obvious people didn't go through this process. So
Right.
it's everything you're describing are things that weren't done on the front end, right? And then it gets passed on after the fact, and you've got use issues, or you've got who's paying what bills and who's, it. A lot of people I think go into this just assuming, oh, 3 people are getting are becoming co-owners of this, and they'll just split everything 3 ways, and that's it, right? And that is typically things don't work out that neatly after the fact. So
And even though the parents are going to start with this important conversation and maybe they're going to get the buy-in from everybody up front,
mhm.
they do need to face the reality that that may not always be the case.
Right,
Things will change down the road. So creating a plan that's flexible, that will not only allow those to get out in the future if that becomes appropriate because of relationships, because of location, or just they don't enjoy it anymore. But on the other side, allowing those who want to stay in to be able to afford to keep it. So we can structure things so that it's kind of like you can leave this ownership situation if you want to, but you're not going to get fair market value for it because we need to keep it affordable for those who want to stay.
right,
That works for some families. Others say, nope, if they want to go, they take nothing, they take their share. But we can structure that in a way to make it to really look at both sides of the story to say this person might need to leave, or any of them may, but we also need to keep it affordable for those who want to keep it.
yep, that's great.
Okay, so then we've got all the rules, or as many as we can come up with. So now we have to make it legally binding. And this, again, this seems obvious, but what happens to those families who sit down, they have the tough conversation about, are we going to keep it? And they come up with the rules, but then they never call the attorney to say, let's get this documented. And to be honest, I help them with the rules. They don't need to come to me at this stage. They can come to me much earlier than this.
Sure,
But if we don't legally bind it on people, then as soon as it's more convenient to not follow the rules, they're not going to follow the rules.
right,
So, when it comes to things like, all right, I've decided this isn't working for me anymore. Mom and dad died 10 years ago. This seemed like a good idea 10 years ago, but now my spouse got a job in Florida and we're moving. And I just don't want to be a part of this anymore. Um, Now we need to make it legally binding. We need to know, what's the purchase price for this person to get out? How are we going to determine that? What is the terms for that payment? Those are things that are going to be really easy to disagree on if we don't have that in writing and make that legally binding on them.
got it. That's good.
And maybe even worse than that is, what happens if I think Adam, you had said earlier, you see these cases where the parents just leave it to the three kids and they own it. Well, what happens if one of those kids dies and it hasn't been planned for?
Right.
The spouse owns it at that
Yep.
point with
Right.
two siblings. Now, what
Correct.
happens when that spouse remarries and then he dies? Well, now suddenly there's a stranger. There's somebody who you never invited into your family who's owning that property with you. And that's the can of worms that we look at if there isn't a proper plan.
Right. No,
Wow.
that's great.
Yeah.
And then the fifth rule is share your plan. And so we kind of come full circle back to have that conversation. You have it at the front end, but you need to have it at the back end. You need to let them know what the plan is. And in fact, the sooner you can start handing over the reins of responsibility, the better chance of success you have. If you're always the one to fill the gas tanks, you're always the one to mow the lawn, and you think the day you die, suddenly they're going to figure this stuff out, they
Yeah,
might not.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. I think we're big believers in communication as well, and especially with our older clients who are really getting serious about this. I mean, people should be serious about this earlier on, but it seems like this is something people tend to put off oftentimes. But we encourage people to talk with their kids regularly about their estate plans as soon as they're comfortable in doing so, because the sooner you do that, whether it's involving something like this or just your general estate, um, it clears up the situation when the kids do need to start helping with it or planning once the parents are gone, right? If it's dropped on you out of nowhere when mom and dad pass and you have no idea what's going on, it makes for a very complex situation. So
Yeah.
communication is obviously important. Yep.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%, Andy. Create a runway.
Yep.
Don't just take off. Make sure you you prepare them for that. And also when you've gone through the estate planning process or cabin planning process, I think there's a lot of education that comes through that process and a lot of peace of mind as a result.
Hmm.
But your kids don't know that, and they may worry and they may be afraid to ask the questions for fear of looking like they're being greedy or selfish in some
Right.
way. And they want to know that there's a plan. They're going to get peace of mind from that as well.
100%. Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that's a great point because I mean, just money and estates and everything tends to be one of the most private things in people's lives, period. And so it's not easy to start having that conversation with people outside you know, even spouses, right? I mean, so once you start bringing your kids into that circle, it takes a little bit of trust, but it does solve a lot of problems on the front end once you're comfortable to do it. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yep,
I think it gets easier, but
right.
Absolutely.
um,
So for people who are watching this and saying, I'd like to have a conversation or I'd like to start this conversation, how should they go about getting a hold of you or working with you, that type of thing? How does that work with you?
absolutely. The consultations are always free, no cost, no obligation, no expectation. Just get information. Wherever you can get information, do it. And don't get it from your neighbor or your sister because it's probably not going to be accurate. So consultations are free at our firm. You will get to talk with an attorney, myself, or either of my colleagues who also practice in these areas. And that starts with a phone call. So we can just give you some guidance, let you know what the anticipated cost would be to do that planning. So you go into it eyes wide open. And then you can determine if that's something that is worthwhile for your family. Those phone calls can be booked on our through our website. There's contact information, which is provisionlawfirm.com.
Okay.
Our phone number as well, 952-563-0152. Any way you can find us, just reach out and we'll get that call scheduled for you.
Sounds
That's
great.
great.
And we'll
Yep.
provide a link and all the information down in the comments to the meeting or the video as well. So um, any last words, any wrap up, Andy, Carrie, as we kind of work through this?
All I'd say is I just really appreciate Carrie's time. I mean, this was super helpful, and I think just getting people to start having these conversations um, is great because it provides peace of mind. It solves lots of problems on the front end, and I know this is something, at least in our experience in working with clients, that they tend to put off. Nobody's super excited to talk about their own demise. That's never usually, something
Right.
everybody's looking forward to, but they understand that it's very important. And so I think to Carrie's point, if you have, this is something that you're thinking about and you're wondering how to take care of this problem, or just to put things in order, I think having a conversation with someone like Carrie it's a great starting point just to figure out what your options are. So
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank you both for the work you do. Everybody knows that their financial advisor is their quarterback. And while you don't do all the things, you know about a lot of them and you're connected with a lot of people. So I appreciate that even though it's things that you don't necessarily do directly, you're making people aware that this is going to impact their families, it's going to impact their assets. So I appreciate you guys just spreading that word and being that center of influence that people need to meet other professionals.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being on. We really appreciate it. And of course, if anybody likes the content, go ahead and subscribe and like within the video as well. And you can reach Carrie and her colleagues over at Provision Law, and we'll link that down below. Thank you.
Thank you guys.